one of the things that kind of broke me in that world, that really made me recognize that I need to be authentic to people first, and ultimately my staff and the people that are responsible to me, before I am responsible to my customers. Customers are not always right.
So,
No,
at what point did you realize what type of problems about the way you were doing things or the way that you approach things that you were like, there's got to be a shift, and this is the direction that I want to go in?
I think they recognized that they were about to just walk all over me, and I was undervaluing my business. And they were the two founders of their business, but they had a board. And the board and their shareholders would have expected them to some degree to just take advantage of me if they could, because of my own lack of experience. Then good for them. But these two founders didn't do that. That was the moment where I realized that people are good.
Welcome to another episode of If They Knew What I Know. Today, I am happy to bring on Cole Snell. He's been an entrepreneur for 23 years and has had many exits, building across food, insurance, blockchain, and private credit. Now he's focused on building an AI-driven, blockchain-enabled private credit infrastructure engine to revolutionize SMB loans. Proud to be in a fellow exited founder group with him, and I think you're all going to enjoy him on the show today. You were telling me about how you set up your companies for success going in from the start, which is, I think, unique compared to a lot of other people. And if you would, tell us a bit more about that again.
So for me, it's just understanding who I am. At the end of the day, I mean, I need to understand that I'm a really good founder and I'm an okay CEO. So what does that mean? It means that I'm a good early stage CEO and I'm an average operating CEO. So it kind of begins with me understanding and knowing myself, knowing that I have a responsibility to implement a culture within the organization from day one. Whenever it is that I leave the business, that's a signal of a win. That's a signal of success. That's a signal to investors or employees or any type of counterparty that even if I'm fired, or if I have an abrupt departure, if I leave by way of event, merger, or acquisition, that's a sign of success. And whenever I build companies, I build around that single point of culture, that again signals when I leave, everybody wins. And it's important that you do that, because when a CEO, founding CEO leaves, which happens a lot, one way or another, abrupt or slow.
Yeah.
It's often abrupt. That CEO is usually tied to contingencies like restrictive covenants. And those restrictive covenants are tied to the company paying said founder over a period of time. And that founder doesn't want their departure to be disruptive, because they want the company to be able to continue to write those checks and cash those checks. So that's a cultural thing that I think is really important from day one as a CEO, that if whenever I leave, you all win.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And the two things come to mind there. And if you could talk about these two things. One is, if you're setting everybody up from the beginning that you're self-aware and that you're replaceable and that it's to be expected, the person coming in also has to embody that. Otherwise, if they're not that self-aware, or if they are much more controlling or need to feel like they're more of the center of the attention, it's going to cause a major issue. So I'm curious
Mm.
about your replacements. What has that been like for organizations that you've left? Because you've left quite a few, because you've been very successful. And the second part of it is something I forgot, which I'll come back to.
Yeah, sure. I call that, and refer to that as superpower culture. Implement superpower culture. I implement that with myself, and then employee, whoever I'm employee number one as a startup, employee number two also feeds off of superpower culture, employee number three, employee number four. When you have a foundation of superpower culture, and superpower culture simply is what you like to do and what you're good at are one and the same. So you create a culture of allowing people to do what they like to do, then everyone is accountable to doing what they like to do. So if someone in the company who's honest and hardworking and is likable is doing what they don't like to do, what happens is they start to stick out like a sore thumb. It
Mm,
starts to be really obvious that they don't like what they're doing. And so we have a responsibility, again, provided that person is honest and likable and hardworking, we have a responsibility to go to them and say, hey, so and so, you clearly are not culturally aligned, which means that it's clear that you aren't enjoying what you're doing. We want you to enjoy what you're doing. What do you like to do? And we're going to let you just go do that. Right. And that's, but again, that person has to be honest. Number one, that word is really important. And it creates an environment and it shows that person that they can be honest to us about what they like to do. It creates an environment of self-awareness. It creates an environment of allowing people to be themselves, because when you are yourself, you are doing what you enjoy. I don't mean to get overly philosophical, but creating a culture in an organization does take an understanding and awareness of oneself, and then what that turns that how that expands and how that kind of culturally expands out through the organization.
mm. The culture that you're talking about, though, is one that clearly you're embodying. Have you been involved in the direct recruiting process of your successors and their onboarding and training?
Yes. So I've had three exits, and I've been in between the exits, I've had other specific roles. So I hire my successor. I like to hire my successor within a year of starting an organization. And for me, yeah, because I create redundancy. Like a win is for me to leave. The quicker I can leave and exit, the better off the company is. So I hire my replacement pretty quick. So I usually end up wearing by default, and I don't care to, the CEO badge. I could care less about that title, truthfully. At the end of the day, I'm a founder. This business is my baby, and I take great pride in that. The CEO title is really a point of leverage in a lot of ways. It's strategically, investors have an expectation that someone will do that job, and the right person to do that job early on is usually the founder. But then I hire my COO as a replacement, because the person that's inclined to be a CEO, COO, the type of person that likes to do that operational work, is really something that I do not like to do. And when I leave, usually we need a CEO who is operationally minded. I'm not operationally minded. I'm growth minded. I'm
Mm,
innovation forward. I'm a risk taker. I'm a founder at the end of the day. I'm a team builder. But we do need an operator in place. We need someone who likes to follow a process and stick to a roadmap, if you will. Founders, as you know, like to get off script pretty
yeah.
quick. So that's what I do. I hire a COO that supports me and gives the organization stability and certainty. And when the time is right, usually that person steps in and I have that conversation straight up with them. I am direct with them, and I just say, look, if things go planned, you have my job, and let's act that way, because I don't, and that creates a real neat bond, right? That's kind of like an exercise in corporate ego deflation. In a lot of ways, so you kind of and then when the company sees the CEO and the COO working in this tandem, where the CEO is saying, hey, well, it's time for me to leave, I'll go, and so will fill in, really, it gives everyone a lot of peace of mind.
Interesting. Has your approach, because you have a very self-aware, very clear approach to you getting out of the way in favor of an operator jumping in, has that backfired?
uh, of course.
Okay, because it sounds
Yeah,
great on paper.
yeah. Of course it has. I like to say about founders or people that start businesses,
Mhm.
if you can't speak to failure, you're either lying or not trying hard enough. So
Okay.
I didn't come up with that. I think it might have been Winston Churchill, but I'm not sure. It was someone along those lines. So yeah, for sure, it has backfired. It it's gone perfect once. Let's put it that way. Like really went perfect
Okay.
once. Like
Okay.
really, 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 really well. Like and that was my last exit. My last exit, it went. So I think I'm getting better at it. I think through trial and error and through, you have a plan on paper and technically what should work well from a cultural perspective or even from a startup organizational perspective, but it does take experience to kind of get it right. And my last exit, I got it right. The exit before that was not as good. The exit before that also, uh, I may have left a little bit on the table.
Okay, so you've built across food, insurance, blockchain, private credit. What was the last one that was the good one?
Was blockchain. That was the blockchain exit. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that
got
was
it.
a good one. Like that was really solid. Like the cultural, my number two in the organization is now essentially running the business.
But you said the exit
Yeah.
was, oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, 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 it's good. Go ahead.
You said that the exit was good, but in going back to what I was saying, your approach, which is being extremely self-aware, bringing in an operator fast, and trying to get yourself out of the way within a year, that's a really interesting framework, right? That not everybody's following. Uh,
Yeah.
and
No,
where
I
has
think
that?
let me correct something though. So I I try to bring in, I stay usually on as CEO or founder for 4 years or so,
Yeah,
3 to 4 years. I try to bring in a COO within a year,
got it.
of that, like a serious person. And over the next 2, 3, 4 years, you're kind of ideally in a perfect world grooming that person as an operating. When the business starts to move into more operational kind of day to day, then that CEO would kind of come in. And my current business, just as an example, which is a private credit blockchain business, I do not have a COO right now. So I'm still looking for that person. It's not, the business is not a year old yet. It'll be in July, it'll be a year old. So through abundance and manifestation, I'm willing that person into my life.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Maybe they'll hear the podcast and you'll get the right call. Who knows?
100% they will. That's exactly why I'm here.
Oh, perfect. And I love manifestation. All right, so I remember what my second question was earlier, going back to it. You said that oftentimes CEO replacements are very quick. I think that's what you said
Yeah.
there. Right. So
Yeah,
talk about that a little bit.
right. It's called a board. It's yeah, you want a board like you want a hole in the head sometimes. So be careful of what your term sheets look like. But I mean, that's not always, but I mean, you have to be prepared for it. I mean, it's like when I was younger starting businesses, I thought I just, I would raise money and I had these term sheets that I would skim through and I was excited to bring on the money and put it to work and continue to build out my dream. And you realize, oh, I have this board. You have a board, and you think, wait, I got a whole bunch of advisors, but you're like, well, no, I got a whole bunch of people that, you know, will probably fire me really at the end of the day and, bring their guy in or girl, right? So yeah, that's the thing to be cautious of is controlling your company by being aware of your position on in and or around the board.
Okay. Any way that you've created leverage or ways to just navigate that better?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to it's a really good question, and it's a hard question to answer because there's two answers to the question. There's again a cultural answer to the question, and then there's a strategic answer to the question. And I think Elon is a really good example of it. It's if you think about how some people like Elon or Bezos or Zuckerberg have managed to keep control of their businesses. And so if you and these are, that would be a great thing for anyone to kind of like Google, if you will. And I think another good example of it is Sam Altman. I mean, that's a really interesting story. I mean, Sam Altman was raised a bunch of money, got a board, was fired, and then I think days or hours later rehired,
Right.
again as
Yeah.
CEO
Yeah.
of OpenAI. And you have to really, I mean, that would be a really good case study for someone to understand, what happened there. There's a cultural component again to that. There were, strategic reasons as to why they fired him, and then strategic reasons as to why they hired him again. But I think there was a lot of cultural things. There was a lot of kind of unwritten rules that were applied to, why that did not happen. And what does that mean? That means just confidence. At the end of the day, it means swagger. It means uh, like significance to markets, investors, users, of your product. What did they want to see? Boards don't always get it right. And in that instance, for that board to bring him back was really special. So I guess that's the general. You can control your board, and you can control your board through strategic, and have a good lawyer, obviously. Make sure you're in a position to kind of control your board. But I mean, the whole idea of controlling your board is, I kind of don't really know what that means at
Mm.
the end of the day. That's People talk a lot about it, but I mean, depending on how voting works, and I don't know if we want to digress into a whole kind of corporate structural kind of conversation, but
Yeah.
it's something at a high level, it's something to be really aware of, because I think that's a big disappointment for founders is once they raise money and they bring on a board, things may not go as suspected, and they do often lose control of your company. But if you're aware that that might happen and you plan around that effectively, it's less of an emotional experience.
How long have you been a founder?
I'm 52, and I've been a founder since I was about 25.
Okay. So quite a
Yeah,
while. And
yeah.
you have your framework that we've kind of talked about that you like following. I imagine you didn't start that way.
No,
Okay. So
no.
at what point did you realize what type of problems about the way you were doing things, or the way that you approach things, that you were like, there's got to be a shift, and this is the direction that I want to go in, or, like that moment or that experience. Talk about that.
I think the shift, that's a really good question. The big shift for me was it was probably my healthcare exit, and the it was I was dealing with some. This was when I was quite a bit younger, and I was selling the company to a group of much more sophisticated buyers, and they were really, really good people. They were just, and they recognized that I wasn't doing a very good job advocating for myself in the deal when we were negotiating the sale, because I really didn't know what I was doing. And they they went out and hired a third party mediator, because I think they recognized they were about to just walk all over me, and I was undervaluing my business. And they were the two founders of their business, but they had a board. And the board and their shareholders would have expected them to some degree to just take advantage of me if they could. Or maybe you don't even look at it like they're taking advantage of me, just for them to just be kind of killers in business and get the most value, which would mean, buying my company for the cheapest price that they could. And if I was willing to agree to a devalued valuation because of my own lack of experience, then good for them. Right?
Okay.
But these two founders didn't do that. What they did is they actually brought in a third party. I even remember the guy's name, but he was a mediator. He was essentially an accountant from a big accounting firm that do these corporate um, buyout kind of mediation. And what they do is they come in and they find fair market value on both sides and find a strategic fit. And so what these two founders did is they recognized that I didn't really understand how to value my business or how to advocate for myself in the right way. And so they told their board that they were struggling with the negotiation and need to bring in a third party. But they brought in a third party so the third party would come back and say, look, his business is worth this, your business is worth this. and this is how we're gonna do the deal. Technically it was a merger, but it was an opportunity for me to exit. So that taught me a lot. That was the moment where I realized is that you can be people are good, right? And that really encouraged me to treat other people the way that those two guys treated me, and where they
Interesting.
yeah, and I recognized that that was a big defining moment for me to just trust people. I do, and I do from that experience. I do trust people. I do think people are good. I still think you need to advocate for yourself, but that could have went a lot worse for me. So that was a real defining moment for me.
Interesting. And that defining moment was more at the moment of exit where you were dealing with people that were bigger than you. Any defining
Yeah.
moments of you as the top dog of your organization where you realized I need to do things differently than the way I'm operating or running things? Probably earlier in your career.
Oh, geez. I mean, that's a super good question. I'd like to give you a very specific example. So there was a period of time with my food business where to make money in food is very, very difficult. The margins are very, very small. It's a very volatile industry. You have perishable inventory.
Right.
It's just difficult to make money in food. And that's where I learned really how to make money is that I managed to sell a food business. It was my biggest exit. And now I'm in the financial industry, and holy cow, is the financial industry easy compared to the food world. Now, that said, and we can get into that, but to answer your question specifically, a very defining moment for me early on was when I had my food company. I had a very vertically integrated business. And within my food company, I owned a chain of restaurants. I owned one very high end steakhouse, and then I owned a chain of QSR businesses, which were burger shops. This was when I was in the beef industry and we were trading beef. So to be profitable, I needed to vertically integrate my business, and I needed to run these restaurants as a way to move my inventory through it. What I noticed about running restaurants, and I spent a lot of time in the restaurants because the restaurants were very volatile. It's a very, very volatile business. And the whole industry was difficult. And we had retail stores, we had restaurants, we had wholesale, and we even had a relationships with abattoirs and cow calf programs, and right all the way to the farm level. So we were fully vertically integrated, but it was the restaurants that demanded a lot of my time because there was so much profit potentially there, but there was so much volatility, and the volatility were in the staff. And what I realized is that with restaurants, and especially when I was in the very high end steakhouse, and I was there was a bar and there were drinks flowing and there was alcohol. This was 15, 20 years ago when, again, rules and culture around the staff, the bartender always kind of had a drink, and the chef would have a beer while he was, cooking. And this is kind of the world. And I think it's less now than it was then, simply because drinking is less in style than it is now. But back then,
Yeah.
if a chef didn't have a beer in his hand, or the bartender didn't have a glass of wine on the go while they were doing their job, they weren't doing a good job. They weren't being authentic. So this, as I'm describing it, really took hold of my business. You could see that the staff were very loose. It was fun. It was I was creating this warm, fun environment. And I would go in and I would sit at the bar and I would do my work and I would manage the restaurant if I was there, and I would have a glass of wine, while I was there. And if the point of it, and the big change that I made is that I realized that over time that my presence, and if I had a glass of wine in my hand, it would say to the entire staff, it's okay for you also to have a glass of wine in your hand. And or if I was just sitting at the bar, or even if I was just in, having dinner. So I cut that out. I just stopped. I stopped entirely. I didn't just stop going in and having a glass of wine while I was there. I stopped like alcohol entirely because I didn't want my staff to emulate what I do. And that's the one big thing that I realize is that and when I stopped doing that, I didn't have a problem with it. It wasn't like it was something that was out of control in my life. It was more again of a cultural thing. And so when I went in and I sat down and I had Perrier or a San Pellegrino, it was amazing how all of the staff around me would start doing the same thing because they respected me. Instead of my wine inventory kind of disappearing month to month, I would see my sparkling water inventory disappearing month to month. And then kind of became, and I've always been into fitness and I've always been, healthy. And, I like to kind of have a certain physique and I take pride in that. And a lot of even my chefs would start, saying, not only did they put down the drink and they would pick up the water, they would also say, "Hey, can I come to the gym with you?" Or you go for a bike ride. Can we go bike shopping? I want to get a new bike. I'd like to go for a bike ride with you. So it was amazing, even in that environment, how what I learned so much that in leadership and it's so cliche, but it's so powerful is that people will emulate you, even
Mm.
to that level, even by removing a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and replacing it with a San Pellegrino. It was amazing how that changed. And I recognized that. Now it took me a while to recognize that, right? The importance of that. And I mean, for me to get to that point, and the one piece of it that I haven't talked about is for me to get to that point, I had to see a lot. I'm not going to get into the gory details, but I had to see a lot of crazy things go down in my restaurants before I got to that place where I realized the culture of alcohol in an environment like that is horrible. But I can tell you some war stories.
I was going to say the reason why you're not getting into gory details is because you're under a confidentiality agreement still, or that's we're good.
We're good. No, 15 years ago, I don't have that. And these,
Have at
yeah.
it, have at it, because everybody is wondering. Everybody sees that alcohol sales have gone down and alcohol use has gone down. Have at it. Tell us some of the things that you were stopping.
All right. Okay. So here's one of the reasons why I cut the culture of alcohol out of my. And by the way, restaurants, you only make money in restaurants on your alcohol sales. I mean, in fine dining restaurants, you only make money on your alcohol. Your food is a loss leader. Now, in QSR or quick service restaurants, you can make a lot of money on your food sales, but it's a different food cost and it's a different dynamic. So my high-end steakhouse, and this was a high-end steakhouse. This was New York Times reviewed. We had people coming from all over the world to eat there. It was a very eclectic, very special thing. It was a very, very successful restaurant. So we were very dependent on a culture of selling wine. Like we needed to sell wine. So if I was, in the restaurant when I was there, we were doing wine tastings. We were selling, there were some of the wines that we were selling were thousands of dollars. I mean, there was a culture, but my fear was is that if I removed this culture of me being kind of it's like if I was a Ford, if I owned a Ford dealership and I was found driving a Chevy and I wasn't driving a Ford, it's like me going into my restaurant and not drinking wine was like, oh, I'm not authentic. I'm a fraud. So, all that said, one of the things that kind of broke me in that world that really made me recognize that I need to be authentic to people first and my ultimately my staff and the people that are responsible to me before I am responsible to my customers. Customers are not always right. I believe it's your staff. It's the people, it's your counterparties, it's your investors, it's the people that rely on you. They are the ones that are right. These are the people that you need to serve first and set an example for first. And it is not your customers. I mean, I don't believe that. We train our customers to behave. If you're doing well and you have something of true value. Anyway, the worst of all of the stories is that I got a phone call. I had this home that I was living in, and my neighbor came to me about 3 months before this happened, and he said, "Cole, would you hire my daughter to work in your restaurant?" And my neighbor, I was renting this house at the time, and my neighbor was my landlord. And he came to me and he said, "Would you hire my daughter?" And I said, "Sure, I'll hire your daughter, and she can come and work at my restaurant." She was a hostess, and I can't believe I'm going to tell this story. And so the hostess, she was there working one night, and one of my chefs took a liking to her. And I wasn't in this restaurant all the time. I mean, maybe once or twice a week, I would kind of pop in. I had a management team, and I mean, I owned the thing, and I was just again, running an entire supply chain company. And then my neighbor called me up and he said, my daughter didn't come home last night from work. Do you know where she is? And I'm like, no, I'm like, I just saw him in the driveway. Right. I'm like, no, I'll
Yeah.
call the manager of the law. And so one of my chefs, he was engaged and to be married shortly, called me up about an hour later and he said, Cole, and he never calls me. And he goes, he called me up, goes, Cole, I really screwed up. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, I kind of kidnapped, her name was Sam. I kind of kidnapped Sam. And I'm like, what? You did what? How did you? And so anyway, he decided, that he would, now he didn't technically kidnap her, but he decided to create this event that didn't happen. And he got her in a car and drove her out and decided to make, a pass at her. And everyone was fine. She got back home. He got fired, obviously. And his wife never ended up marrying him. But I mean, these are the kind of, gory details, that happen. And I was kind of just wondering to myself, like that was the kind of, and he blamed it on drinking, right? He blamed it on the fact that he had some drinks and he kind of felt like a little liquid courage and decided to, make this decision. And that's for me when I realized that we cannot have a culture of, in an environment that's so fueled by alcohol, we cannot have an environment we can't have an environment of alcohol in the business. And so even though the point of it really though is that even though the business was dependent, the entire profit center and the lifeblood economically was alcohol, this thing was still so bad for people and it brought out the absolute worst in people. And it caused one of my chefs, who was a really good guy, to make a really bad decision. And it cost him his marriage. And it's this liquid that you put in your body that makes you go crazy. But yet that was enough for me. So not only did I change the culture of the business, but I went and sold that business really quickly because I wanted nothing to do with it. And I will never go back into a business that deals with alcohol because I don't know
Okay.
how these people do it.
Excellent story on a dangerous liquid. Tell us about a magical elixir that was present in one of your businesses that made you not want to sell it, even though you should.
I've never had a business I didn't want to sell. Uh, uh,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't build them. I build them to sell them. I build businesses with my customer in mind. Before I spend a dollar on even structuring the business and setting up the entity, I already know who I want to sell it to.
And you tell the founding team members, like they know this is your mindset. They're
Yeah.
comfortable that you set up everybody to be ready. Because this is actually something that, you know, is very uncomfortable for much of the entrepreneurial world. They think that exiting is supposed to be a secret. There's a lot of
Mm,
old guys out there that are holding on to very successful businesses out there and won't talk about the day that they're going to leave because they're afraid of they're thinking everybody around them is going to start finding other jobs or leaving or it's all going to fall apart without them. They don't understand. Everybody knows founding a business is not forever. It's
mm-mm.
you always are going to leave.
Yeah.
So how did you always have that mindset even from earlier on? Because that's not typical.
Yeah, well, I had businesses taken from me. I mean, or when I was earlier, I lost control of businesses.
Okay.
I felt like I started out thinking, "Oh, I'll just have this forever." I had an unrealistic view of my importance in the business when it grew and
Mhm.
investment came in. And I felt like when I was younger and I started companies, I felt, well, this business will always need me as much as it does in 6 or 8 years from now as it does on day one. And that's just not true. So, but then I also realized really who I was. And I realized that I was a really good startup founder and not a good operator. So, can you imagine how excited I am right now using artificial intelligence,
Cool.
and as long as I leverage artificial intelligence and don't open up any more restaurants, I can probably knock off some like pretty major exits in the next 10 years or so. I'm in the prime of my life. I've been a founder since I was 25. I've
Yeah.
made all of the mistakes. And now I have AI in my back pocket. I had the ability to build a business without any technical debt and very low human beings. This is the problem with running restaurants. It's really not a problem with alcohol in
Right.
restaurants. It's a problem with people at the end of the day. As much as I love them and try my best to put in cultural guardrails, the most consistently inconsistent thing of my life is my payroll or other people. So if I can have less people and more AI, I'm going to knock out. Like I think probably in the next 10 years, I could probably knock out once I get a little bit of momentum going, and I'm already building that right now. I could probably knock out an exit a year, and that's the new way that I'm looking at this. I mean, for the first time ever as a founder, I'm able to scratch a lot of itches. I've always had to be very cautious of being perceived by my investors as chasing bright, shiny things.
Mm.
Investors want you to be focused on what they're investing their money into, and they don't want you doing multiple things. This is really the curse of a founder because founders really like to scratch a lot of itches. They like to kind of unturn a lot of stones, but they have to discipline themselves and stay focused on, again, what investors are giving them their money to build. But now I actually believe founders have a responsibility to uncover those stones and scratch those itches. And as long as it's adjacent and strategic to what it is that they're doing, I believe they can go down different roads right now and build multiple things at the same time. And I actually think founders have a responsibility to do that because their bandwidth, especially founders that have been building without AI, they've developed this unbelievable bandwidth for processing information, people, and now there's less pressure on you to do that, and you can go very wide right now as a founder. And I'm really encouraging people to do that.
Mm. Do you have particular industries or ideas in mind right now where you're trying to adapt the the potential of AI to that for the next, business a year that you'd like to ideally exit from? Or are you playing more wait and see, learning about all the AI and seeing what comes to you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good. I've been waiting, and now I'm full tilt. I'm pedal to the metal right now. It's time to go, but I have been waiting. But yeah, I'm very big into blockchain still. I really believe in tokenization. I believe in democratizing capital markets. I've been obsessed. My last exit was a tokenized life insurance business and was all heavily regulated, not crypto. The business that I'm working on right now is adjacent to that, but it's private credit. I'm very passionate because I know that AI driven tokenization will provide access to capital and opportunity for the mid market and the average person that like we've never seen before. And I take great pride in being part of that and ultimately driving more money into more people's pockets. At the end of the day, the average person is going to be able to act like a hedge fund manager and carry a portfolio in kind, and that is super exciting. So that's what really motivates me and drives me. But I also believe so much in the human centered approach to AI, and people, there's this friction right now with AI where people feel as though they need to build some kind of technical approach or implement something technically within their organization or their life using AI. I kind of equate it to like when CRMs first came out, everyone felt like they needed a CRM, but there was all this friction and how to
Uh-huh.
really use the CRM, and no one was really doing it to its full capacity. But AI is not like that. AI is actually, and the technical aspects of AI are unbelievably simple. Like all these AI consultants that have popped up out there right now that are offering people this technical approach is all so silly, to me. The AI, the technology is outrageously simple, and you don't need a consultant to teach you, how to use it. But what you do need is there's an opportunity to be human centered about the AI. There's again a cultural change on converting people in an organization to just push different buttons and use different tools and to create cultural awareness. And I also believe that AI is going to provide human beings the ability to network, to connect, to shake hands, to meet in person. This is, and the people that are front running that, like the organization that you and I belong to, the only reason, like I'm relatively new
Yeah.
to that and how you and I met is because of AI. I actually have time to do that now. I didn't have time as a
Yeah.
founder to do these kind of things, but now I have time to connect with people. I have time for this podcast. I have time. Like you and I are going to be spending 4 hours with each other in a room just
Next week.
next week,
Yeah.
making our lives better. Right. I,
Right.
I haven't had time to do that. My business is still moving forward at an exponential pace, but I can spend time with human beings like I've never been able to do that before. So I believe that's going to provide exponential happiness, and in my life, and the AI is going to provide me with exponential money.
I love that take on it. Completely true and isn't talked about enough. I don't think that I have anything better to add after that. I did have one question, and hopefully this doesn't take us too far down a rabbit hole because but your answers are great. You seriously embody the title of this show. You know so much that has never been documented. But the example of the shift that you had with the Perrier and in the restaurant, right? With everyone following suit in a very kind of passive way, passive leadership, because you weren't mandating it. It wasn't a new policy, right? It was very passive leadership. When trying to replace yourself, how are you as an active leader in actually mandating and educating and taking those reins? Because you're very self-deprecating, you're very passively strong, you're self-aware, but that's a very different skill set than, actively transitioning.
Mhm. I'm very intentional about educating my team because as a startup founder, you're always doing something innovative, and something innovative causes a lot of brain damage for people. You still need to do a lot of reading. So I have a culture of reading in our organization, and I'm very intentional when I first started. So this company now that I have as an example, and I'm better in this company right now than I've better been in any other company as it relates to this, just because I have more experience with it. But we started out with a really high standing meeting cadence, where we're meeting every day for a half an hour, checking in, building culture, checking in. Quarter after that, we went down to 3 meetings a week. The quarter after that, we went down to one standing meeting a week. Now we have no standing. We're in our fourth quarter, essentially. We'll be 1 year old at the end of this quarter, and we have no standing meetings because we've done a lot of the brain damage. We now meet offline in small groups through chats and network. I think standing meetings are very effective if you are doing something very intentional, but otherwise, I want people to feel as though they're trusted. But to answer your question, it's reading, and more reading. Just becoming a subject matter expert in whatever it is that you do, and knowing that you can do it. Knowing that if you want to have your team um, feel empowered, and to have them show up in a room of experts, being the smartest person in the room. It's just about anyone can do it. It's just about do the reading. Like, it's not complicated. Read materials. There's so much material out there. When
Mm.
you're on the plane, when you're in the car, you're in the morning going for a walk, when you're at the gym, like, instead of listening to Metallica on the rowing machine, I listen to an rwa.xyz podcast now, because I'm relentless about being the best in the industry that I'm in. And I'm not going to do that by, as much as I enjoy Metallica, I'm not going to do that so I try to push that culture down. Read, 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 read. I just cannot. I think it was Warren Buffett said that. Didn't he just like read all the time? Wasn't that his
I
thing?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So we put standing meetings to a certain point and read, just read.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on today, Cole. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been super fun. Appreciate you, Matt.
Thanks for listening. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast player. And if you'd like to connect, visit us at contingency.com or find us on LinkedIn.